how are you today? Welcome to my channel. This is Whiskey and Wool. This is my Cast On With Me series where I take a deep dive into one particular project that I'm going to cast on while I film. In the midst of filming, I have not yet cast on. I have empty needles. An empty needle. I probably need a second, but nevertheless, let me keep going and finish explaining to you. So yeah, we're going to take a deep dive into a new cast on, and I'm going to just take you through my process and chat with you about how I came to the conclusions and decisions that I've made, and we'll probably talk about other little things that are going on in my life. Some things that maybe some books I've read, or some television I've watched, or I don't know, whatever comes to mind as I am speaking with you. I just wanted to get comfortable and sit back a little bit. Yeah, let me just make sure. How's that? Is that good? Random hair. So my name is Shannon. You can find me on social media you can find me on Ravelry. I post my knitting updates there most frequently. I am not very frequent, but more frequently than any other social media. I also use Bluesky, love Bluesky. Talked a lot about it last week in my Knitters Life series, which is my traditional knitting vlog style of recent finished objects and projects that I'm working on. Yeah. And I'm also on Instagram, and you can find me as Whiskey and Wool on all of those places. On Instagram and Bluesky, there are 4 zeros, or not zeros, O's, letter O, in the word wool. So yeah, that is all of that. I live in northern New Jersey. If it's your first time here, I live right across the river from New York City. And if I speak about climate, that gives you an idea of the climate that I live in terms of like air temperature and weather. In terms of weather, that's what I mean by climate. So let's get into it. I am going to be casting on a project that my viewers helped me figure out, not the project but the yarn, because I've realized that this past year, maybe a little bit longer, maybe even 2 years, I've been knitting a little bit less. I used to be able to finish a sweater like the one I'm wearing. By the way, I'm wearing the Akemi sweater. It's a project from a couple years ago. I have my phone in front of me, so I'm just going to look down to find the designer name in my project list. I think it's Keiko Kikuno. It's a Japanese designer. Hold on, I'm almost there. Wow, I made it a while ago. I made it in 2022. Around this time of year. It took me 6 weeks. I was not slow knitting then. The designer is Keiko Kikuno. Yeah, and I made it out of Moondrake Cormo Sport in the colorway Mint. I don't know if Moondrake still has Cormo Sport in her lineup. I haven't shopped Moondrake's line in a while. Just have been doing other things. So that is just queuing up my phone for my next stuff to talk to you about. That is what I'm wearing. And behind me is a scrappy project, a throw. It's chilly spring here. We're having chilly spring weather. It gets into the 40s during the day, sometimes low 50s, sometimes even 60. But at night it's cold, and yeah, so still using a lap on my lap, an Afghan. I made that a couple years ago by holding 10 strands of fingering weight, or it's their equivalent, together and knitting on size US 17 needles. Big, bulky 1x1 rib knit blanket, very cozy. My cats love it. And yeah, I made a bunch of them. It's a great way to use up partial skeins, because if you have a few skeins that are gonna keep the color kind of the same throughout, you can cycle in dribs and drabs of whatever you've got on hand. So it was a great way to just crank through a bunch of partial skeins and things like that I was tired of seeing hanging around. So it was a great way to use up those, and I grouped them by color. I made a bunch, gave them away, and kept this one gold one for me. I'm actually wanting to make another one, but that is not what I'm going to cast on today. Instead, because I'm knitting slower, that was what I was trying to say. Because I'm knitting slower, I often will be planning what things I will cast on next when I'm knitting my current projects. And lately I've been keeping 3 projects on the needles. One that has a significant amount of mindless knitting, like garter or plain stockinette, either in the round or flat. And then one that's more complicated or interesting to keep me engaged for those moments when I want a more engaging knit. So I currently have a colorwork sweater on the needles, and I have a shawl on the needles that has a lot of stockinette in it. And then my third project is a small travel project. I have a pair of socks on the needles. So those are my 3 projects. My colorwork sweater is very close to being done. Given another week or so, maybe a little bit longer, I will finish it. The only reason it's going to take me longer is because I'm doing color work in the rounds on sleeves, and wow, that is not fun. Really not enjoying it. And I'm knitting on a small circumference needle like this, and I've been having to, because it's tight, it's color work, it's kind of tight on these needles, and I've been having to push the point with my index finger, and it's starting to hurt. So I think I need a little break, and then I can get back into it in another day or two. So this new cast on will be really welcome, because I won't have to do that so much pushing with my index finger, because the stitches are just snug on the needle. Either that or I need a thimble. I actually stabbed my finger yesterday because I was using not 16-inch circular, but like Haya sharp flexi flips, and they were really sharp. And I ordered a new set of those that are addies, where the addies have a dull side and a sharp side. So I won't be stabbing my finger over and over when I get to the smallest circumference and I can no longer use a 16-inch. Anyway, real long way of talking about how knitting hurts sometimes. So I was dreaming, and I reached a point where I couldn't decide what to cast on next. And usually I'm pretty decisive, but I had, all of these things will be done probably this year. All of those yarns will be cast on that I put in a poll. But I decided to do a poll and ask my viewers to help me decide, what do you want to see? Because I'd be very happy with any of them. So I did the poll, and the poll was for a self-striping hand spun that is like shades of turquoise to shades of pink to rusty orangey shades, and it would self-stripe. And the sweater that I want to make is called the Mazzani sweater by Lindsay Deegan, I think her name is pronounced, and it's this right here. She made her version with scrappy yarns. My thought was, I'm just gonna do, and many people who made the project, has a lot of projects. It's been around for a while. I think it's been out for I don't know, a couple years. it caught my eye because Milli from Tribe Yarns in the UK, she had been talking about it, and she made at least one out of some fuzzy yarn, and hers just is spectacular. I mean, she just talk about wow. She just wows me. She's so inspiring. I love following her, like her choices, and she loves bright colors. I love bright colors, so I really enjoy watching her, or listening to her and seeing what she's making, seeing what she's up to. The other sweater I was thinking about making is Vintage Flannel by Anna Johanna, out of a blue and white. This is fun, like using my phone instead of having to do this in editing. But using a blue and white yarn, the blue would be the where hers is white, mine would be blue. Where hers is brown, mine would be white. So super cute. Color work though, so I was probably least excited about that. And then the third one was some unknown that I am planning to make using newly finished, like hot off the spinning wheel, hand spun. And this is a 100% Shaniko. Shaniko is a breed that is a cross between Merino and Rambouillet. And it's really nice and soft. It's fine. The micron count is fine. Similar to Merino. I don't know what it exactly is, but it was very easy, lovely spin. This was hand dyed by Yarn Jam, a dyer who's down in the Maryland, Washington, D.C. area. And the colorway name is Glacier Lake. So I talked a lot about this spin the last couple Knitter's Life episodes. And as I was spinning, I was dreaming about what it was I wanted to make with it, like what I might want to make. And this one won out of those three in the poll. I'll put the poll results on here. It really looked like the plaid Vintage Flannel was going to win, but at first there was a lot of interest in that, and I was a little bit bummed only because I already have a color work on the needles, and I was kind of looking forward to doing one of the other two and then finishing this color work and then casting that on. So you may see that one soon, because this color work that I'm working on will be done pretty soon. So you might have this cast on with me, and then in a couple weeks or maybe a month, another cast on with me. I should be doing these monthly because I should be knitting more than I am. Although we're going into summer season where generally I think just everyone doesn't knit as much during the summer. Some people do knit more. It depends on their work schedules. Whether some jobs just are a little less demanding in the summer. Mine certainly is less demanding in the summer than it is. I'm an academic, so I work in an environment where more than half of the employees are 10-month employees. I'm a 12-month employee, but you can imagine, like, when more than half of the employees go away for 2 months, that those 2 months are more chill because there's fewer people around working on things and generating work for me as well. So yeah, that is the lowdown. So I'm going to talk to you about my process of choosing the pattern, and then we're going to cast on. I'm going to cast on while we talk about other things. So to just finish up what I'm going to cast on, while I was back on my phone, while I was spinning it, I was really hoping that the pattern, or that the yardage would be at least 1,000 yards, and that's pretty much what I got. When I did the math, I think I ended up with 980 yards, but it might be off. Like, it's always kind of not exactly a wild ass guess, but like it's a little bit of a guessing game. Like, unless you have a yardage counter, and I don't have a yardage counter. It was just always something that I was never interested in, because you never really know I know the weight You never really know exactly how many yards you have without a yardage counter, or without buying commercial yarn that's been put through a yardage counter. So I was thinking that it would be really fun to do some sort of textured knit with this yarn, something that would give me a little bit of interest but still be fairly simple. And while I was spinning it still, I watched a Cozy Cardigans episode on YouTube. That is Mel, or Melanie. She goes by Mel. She is a Japanese American who lives in Osaka, Japan, with her husband and child, and she has a yarn dyeing business, and she does a little monthly podcast on YouTube where she just talks about her makes and things that she's interested in making. She's also rather slow in terms of does not have a lot of time to knit, slow knitter. So her projects stay on the needles for a while, like mine do. And yeah, so anyway, she talked about this sweater one day, and I really loved it. It's called the Daily Sweater by Knitail. Trying to get it to focus. There we go. It's a boxy cut with a drop shoulder. It reminds me a bit of, and it's got a rib stitch, a patterned rib stitch. It reminds me a bit of the lace boxy sweater, lace and fade boxy, I think. Is that what it was called? By Joey Locatelli? Hoagie did a boxy sweater that she called Boxy, and then there was the V Boxy, and then a while after that she did a lace. I want to say it's Lace and Fade is the name of it, but it might just be lace Boxy, but it had lace panels. I made 2 of them, so it reminds me a bit of that silhouette, which I do like. Although Hoagie's had rather form-fitting sleeves on it. Sadly, though, this pattern, the yarn ends up being about a DK weight, and the yardage was much more. So mine's a sport weight. Yardage is much more than what I have. So I don't think that would work. I would have liked to have made that. Also on Mel's episode, maybe it was a different one, maybe it was the same one, she talked about a sweater by Samantha Guerin. And I checked it out as a possibility. It's this one called Study Session. It's hard to see, but it's a V-neck with texture, with a cable textured pattern. Also a heavier weight. And I didn't love the silhouette as much, although I love V-necks. But when I was looking at the pattern, this one came up. This is by the same designer, Samantha Guerin, and this is called Coffee Date. It is a rib textured knit crew neck. Anyway, you get the idea. It's a textured knit pattern that is like, it's 2x2 where they shift every so often. There's a shift. It reminds me a bit of Rumble Raglan. How that one though was a colorway. That was a 2 color, not rib knit, but just like a 2 color where the colors shifted, like everything shifted over 2 stitches. That's what this is doing. Again, though, it's pretty much a DK. She's holding together a lace and a sport weight to create a DK weight fabric. And although I really liked it, I couldn't make this yardage work. So I landed on my own pattern, so I landed on my own pattern because it is designed for sport weight and the yardage I need is 1,000 yards. So, I even like kind of circled around, like, maybe I could make This is the Mabel sweater that I recently finished by Joji Locatelli. Maybe I could take this and not do the waffle stitch that this is, but do something similar, like some sort of rib stitch. This is a raglan style. This is actually really similar to the Rye Layering Tee, which is the pattern of my own that I'm going to end up making. This pattern is based on this this old J. Crew sweater that I wear to death. That is a set-in sleeve rib stitch. It's machine made, but I used it as inspiration for the Rye Layering Tee. I just wanted a hand knit, basic layering piece that I could make any kind of rib stitch on. So that's the way the pattern was designed. So sadly, in early 2020, I had a moth infestation. So I've made 5 versions of these, 2 sleeveless and 3 long sleeve. My sleeveless ones are fine. My long sleeve ones all got moth eaten. I had a very bad moth infestation in early 2020. And in my finished sweaters, not in my yarn at all, but in my closet where I kept all my knits. And I've beaten them. They're long gone. It took a while. I made an episode about it. If you're having that problem, you can find a YouTube video where I went through my process of how I tackled them and how I conquered them, and all the tips and tricks for dealing with them. I still am paranoid and look for them constantly just in case. Like, I mean, I've moved, so I lived in the woods at that time, and anyway, this is the original. It's a Henley neckline. It also, I wrote the pattern to be either a Henley neckline or a crew neck. Sleeve length can be totally up to you, whatever you like. So you could do like a plain crew neck, just like the one I'm wearing. And the pattern is designed to do any type of rib knit stitch you want. So that particular one that I just showed you was broken rib. I made a 2x2 rib one out of cashmere lace that got moth eaten. I made this one. This one was like ground zero. This particular one that I just showed you with the Henley, it was like ground zero for the moth infestation. I actually think a store-bought sweater was ground zero, but this one was nearby. I think I had a stack of my tees on the shelf, and yeah, I had a store-bought sweater that was really eaten into, and then nearby was this Henley, and that just got gobbled. Like, it had massive holes. Like, I first thought I could mend it because the holes were quite small, but I went to bed and woke up the next day and it was real bad, like massive holes. So it was like actively being eaten from the time that I discovered it to the time that I actually started to do the whole mass cleaning. What a nightmare. What a nightmare. This is not a moth episode though. So yeah, I'm gonna make this Rye Layering Tee. I swatched 2 different rib stitches in the turquoise yarn. This bottom one is mistake rib, where it's a 2x2 rib stitch pattern. You end up with a column. Let me show it to you like this. You end up with a column that is consistently knit stitches, and then the other column is the other 3, so it's a 2x2, so it's 4 stitch repeat. The other 3 stitches end up being a seed stitch. So it's like three columns of seed stitch broken up by 1 column of a knit line, and it is reversible. It looks exactly the same on the other side, which is pretty cool. And then I swatched the stitch pattern that was in Coffee Date. So it's this. It's a 2x2 where you break it up with 2 rounds of stockinette and then change the placement of the 2x2 And you know, she has them a short column or a short set of rows, like maybe 5 or 6 rows broken up by longer, like twice as long probably. That's probably what I'm gonna do too. I am not intending to rip her pattern off at all, and I contemplated buying it, but I couldn't justify buying it to make when the gauge isn't right for me. It wasn't going to be the right gauge. It wasn't going to be the right yardage. I was going to have to heavily mod it. Where making my own pattern, I don't have to mod it at all. I'm not sure if I'm going to do the Henley. I think I want to do a Henley. The little button placket. I think I do. I think that would be cute. Especially for spring. I think it would be cute. It means I have to think about buttons. I published this pattern in spring 2020, ironically, just as the moths were descending. And yeah, I had actually finished 2 before I published the pattern. And it's so funny, when I pulled the pattern out to consider making this, I was like a little nervous. I was like, oh, it could be a little rough around the edges, because my knitting has evolved as, you know, time passes. I learn new things. The way my expectations of what should be in a pattern change. But I was reading through it, I was like, oh, it's pretty good. I think I can work with this. Being a little hard on myself. It is 9 sizes, and I provide a spec. Because it's a rib knit, it is expected that you'll have no more than 2 inches of positive ease. You can even do negative ease if you want, but pick the fit you want. The finished chest is from size 32 all the way up to 64-inch finished chest measurement, so it's quite good, I think, in that regard. And then I think the instructions are good. I have not heard no one has let me know. It's also, I think, pretty affordable by today's standards. I want to say it's selling for around $7. And I think it was the last pattern I might have published, because I went into a period where I just decided that I wasn't interested in developing patterns anymore. I'm a former knitwear designer, and so I did it professionally for a decade before I went into academia. And I started to design patterns for hand knit in 2016, and by 2020 I was just done. It's a lot of work. More power to those who do it. It's a lot of work for very little pay, unless you're a huge name like Steven or Hohi and you're able to make a living. If you are able to, like, I just don't have the stamina, and I don't need the money. I don't need to make money that way. I make a really nice living doing what I do. And it just was more work than it was worth to me. So anything I make, you know, any patterns that I make from here on in, or from 2020 forward, I am just they're for myself. They're for me, not for publishing. So, yeah. So this is what I'm gonna do. I hope all of that sounds good and you're excited to see how this is gonna work. I'm already 30 minutes in and I haven't cast on yet. So this is a wordy one. So I think we maybe have another 10 minutes. I'll do some casting on, we'll do a little chat with you, and we'll go from there. Okay, so this pattern is top down, and you start by casting on one shoulder. Let me see if I can tell you the right shoulder, and then you cast on put that aside, cast on the left shoulder, then connect them with a back neck, so you end up with a little neck drop in the back, about a 1/2 inch neck drop in the back, and then you knit the back down to the armhole, to the bottom of the armhole, and then cast on the fronts, and connect. When you get to the bottom of the armhole in the front, you connect them in the round and knit the rest of the bottom, and then the sleeve is cast on in a, I think it's contiguous method, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't read that far in the pattern. The pattern is very long because of all the alternatives, alternative ways of doing different versions. If you decide you want to do a sleeveless version, you just don't make the sleeves. Instead, you just finish the armhole with a rib knit that matches your choice. So yeah, let's get going. That's also why my swatch is quite small. I don't usually make such a small swatch, but I just didn't want to use too much yarn up. Okay. So, all right, so I am choosing the third size, which will give me a 40-inch finished chest, which should be, I'm about a 39-inch chest, so that should give me an inch of positive ease. It's a rib knit. Should be good. And yeah, so I'm going to start with the third. Oh, so okay, interesting. It's interesting to read a pattern that I wrote for my, really for me, but for purchase, of course, too. But the setup around after you cast on. So I often use long tail cast on, and when you do, I cast on the stitches already. I do long tail, and when you do long tail, you automatically form little knit stitches here on the sides. So your first row of actual knitting after the cast on is a purl side. So this is the wrong side, it's purl. This is the right side, it's knit. And this pattern, your first row after you cast on is purl stitches. So I wonder if that changes. Nope, it doesn't with the left shoulder. Okay, so for my size, I'm casting on 16 stitches and then I'm purling. There is a note in here that we're using short rows to create the shoulder, and that the simplest way to knit these is in stockinette. But if the rib stitch is easy to follow, because some rib stitches are more complicated, like broken rib or mistake rib might be a little complicated till you get it started, like to understand where you should knit or purl. If the knit stitch is easy to follow, you can start your rib stitch right away. Otherwise, you can just do stockinette. I'm going to do stockinette for the first couple rows here, only because the stitch pattern I'm using does have a couple rows of stockinette mixed in, and so I don't think it's going to be noticeable. All right. So I'm reading this really awesome book. You know how when you read a book, I read pretty regularly, so I probably get through a book a month, maybe a little faster depending on how long the books are. I tend to like, I like most genre. I don't love formulaic detective style novels, although I really loved Sherlock Holmes quite a lot, and I really loved what's the Ruth Rendell was one of the authors. Like, there was an author, she wrote mysteries, so but I find that they tend to be formulaic and I get a little put off by that. But otherwise I really like, probably my go-to genre is like sci-fi, fantasy style novels that probably began with Lord of the Rings when I was in middle school. Anyway, So I read a lot of that. I listen to audiobooks mostly. When I'm saying I'm reading, that's what I'm talking about. Like I'm listening to audiobooks rather than actually reading. Only because it fits my lifestyle. Like I have about a 30-minute commute to campus every day, and I'll put that on. It really helps ease the boredom of driving in traffic. So that's awesome. And am I supposed to just, yeah. So I tend to also like female heroines, so I like them to be female centric. I prefer that. I certainly will read a book that's got a male lead, no problem. But I get more excited if it's a female lead and it's a female author. So I read a couple books lately that were kind of meh. One in particular, so the one I read just before this one, I couldn't finish. It's real rare that I can't finish a book, especially when I'm listening to it. That makes it a little bit easier to get through it if you can just listen your way through the parts that are a little rough around the edges, or just not, things just aren't going your way. I don't like it when the lead person is dumber than me. I want them to be as clever as I am, or more clever. I want to be surprised by the cleverness. So I don't like it when people are dumb or they do dumb things. So anyway, I was reading this book called Goldilocks that was just, oh my God, the narration was terrible. The canter of the narration, the tempo, the way that she was reading things, it bugged me constantly. So that was the first thing. And then there were just all these really sort of dumb things happening that I just couldn't get myself through. And I decided to just, I was all in on it for a while, but then I just was like, I don't know if I can finish this. Doing short rows now, so I'm going to try not to lose my place. If I pause that, or if I pause in my telling of this story, it's because of that. Oh, I know what I'm doing. I remember this. I only made it 5 times, so I should remember, right? Knit one, make one. All right, make one left. Yes, ma'am. Okay. So, yeah, so I put that down. I was so annoyed with it, and I picked up this other book that came out in 2023. It's called The Frozen River, and it's by Ariel Larson. It's one of the best books I've read in a long time. So good. The main character, it's based on it's a historic fiction, not sci-fi. Goldilocks was sci-fi. Historic fiction based on a real person named Martha Ballard. You may have heard of her from a movie and book called A Midwife's Tale that came out in the 90s. She kept diaries from her age 50 until her death. So for 27 years, she journaled daily, almost 10,000 entries. And the diary was preserved by her family and passed down generation to generation until it finally ended up in a library, in a public library in Maine. She was a Maine resident in the 1700s. She was born, I want to say, in the 1750s. So from that, but she started to journal in the 1780s. So from the 1780s until her death in the 1800s. I think she died in 1812. She journaled, and she was a midwife. So she had a lot of interesting stories to tell. Now I'm knitting 4. And yeah, it's so compelling. It's so good. So this author, A Midwife's Tale was the a different author's attempt to take the diary, the journals, and give them historic context. So because she was writing in English that was different from how we write and speak nowadays, so she was writing in a certain way, so there was some interpretation of some of the things that she talked about, and there was some context of historical events that were happening, because her journals tended to be very mundane. What Ariel Lawson did was she took a period of time that the journals were written during and embellished it and created this very interesting character, this very interesting main character, who led a somewhat simple life in the countryside of Maine, in a small village that later became Augusta, Maine, which is the capital of that state. But at the time, it was a small country village with all the country gossip and squabbles and, intrigue that can be mustered in a small town in, colonial USA. So super interesting with the way that this author has constructed this world, done some world building based on the 1990s assessment of and analysis of the diaries. So it's so enjoyable. I love it so much. It's like I just am so... The reason I'm talking to you about it is because I'm so floored by how well it's written and how engaging it is. It's just super engaging. All right, and I'm repeating that short row. Okay, cool. Make one left, not right. So yeah, that is my tale of the book I'm reading. I'm always looking for good books to read. That it's interesting, like I have an iPhone, so I use the Apple Books app most often for the audio. And now that I have this historic fiction in my here's what I read kind of thing. Wait, I'm repeating. Short row 2. Right, plus 1 stitch. Okay. Sorry, just making sure that I'm doing that right. And now, wait, I resolved the stitch, and now, yeah, okay, I'm all good. And then, all right, awesome. I'm almost done with this one shoulder. And I haven't started the knit stitch yet. Okay, yeah, I don't think I'm going to. This is only 4 rows, pretty much. Purl to end. Okay. Purl side. The wrong side is pretty easy. It's just, you're always just purling. It's the right side where you're doing something. All right. I shall show you. So this is how you're shaping. This is the shoulder point. This is the neck right here. And then this is where this sleeve will set in. There you go. And it looks like there's 2 more rows, and then I break the yarn, 1 increase right side, then I purl back and then break the yarn and set this aside and do the other side, and then they get connected. And then the back is knit for some time. So yeah, so I just have this basically 4. It'll end up being, I'm going to start the rib stitch, I think, going across this right side. And I think I have, if I'm not mistaken, I do have a place where it says to start the rib pattern. So it says to do that after you join the right side and left side. So maybe I'll wait. How many more rows? It's just, yeah. Right, so it's just 2 more. I may as well wait, right? It'll just be easier. And then I think somewhere else, like when you do reach the point where you join in the round, I know I have some info there about how to make your rib stitch match up on the in this part of the sweater here where you're joining the front and backs. So there are some notes about that as well. But isn't that exciting? I'm so happy. I hope you enjoyed my little chat about the book. Oh, and I was going to just tell you too, quick kitchen update, which I'll talk to you more. I'm getting very close to having a finished design, so I hope to have that to share, some pictures of it, next Knitter's Life, which should be next weekend unless something happens and I'm not able to record. And then it'll be the weekend after that. So in the next week or 2, you will get a Knitter's Life, and I will give you my update on, I'll show you. This will be one of my whips. I'll be showing you this, and I'm hoping to have my colorwork sweater done. Won't that be great? But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this cast on with me. I know I didn't give you much like music and knitting time like I usually do. I just really wanted to talk about that book because I really, really love it. It's so enjoyable. The narrator is perfect. Like just embodies the main character really, really well. Yeah, and it's the book, the narration is all from the main character Martha's perspective. Yeah, she has some interesting things to think about and say and share, and yeah, it's good. Anyway, I will see you soon on a new Knitter's Life episode in the next week or 2. Take care.